Welcome back to this city building game tutorial series in Unreal. Today's episode is going to be about adding some HUD to our game and also giving us the ability to choose what object we want to place down in the world. Right now we've just been using defaults, but now if I click on my healthcare button, you'll see that I can plonk down some healthcare buildings. These buildings don't have any healthcare functionality yet, but the point is I can now switch between placing roads down and placing down some buildings. If I click the building again, it clears the highlights, so I can't place anything down. Zoning, I can select, but I don't have any zoning logic yet, so that's not in yet. But roads and buildings is what today is focused on. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed the series and you enjoyed the video, please subscribe. And without further ado, let's get into the video. So what I did just to prep for this episode off screen is I made these lovely little pixel art button icons that I'm going to be using on the HUD. Obviously make your own, mine are just terrible ones that I did in paint.net, so feel free to do whatever you want there, but just so you can kind of keep in with what I have, I created mine at a resolution of 96 by 96, and I plan to keep that in the game as well, so just use that as a base mark. And I also created this highlight image, which if you look at my road button, it's kind of in the middle here, and then this highlight can go behind it, and then that basically will show whether something is selected or not. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've already created this UI folder. In this folder, I'm going to create a new user interface widget blueprint class, like that, and I'm going to call this my main HUD widget. Like so. If you've never used a widget before, this is basically Unreal's representation of UI and what you'll see on the HUD. So you'll see I've got a canvas here, and this boundary basically represents the edges of the player's screen. And you have all these little options on the left here that you can drag and drop in. I'm actually just going to use a button, and I will use an image as well, but we'll get there when we get there. I'm just going to set the X position to 400 and the Y position to 950 ought to do. And then as I mentioned about the dimensions of my image, just set that to 96 by 96. That you can see that's how big the button will be. And what you can do with buttons on Unreal is if you go to the Appearance tab and then you drop down Style, if you drop down Normal, you can actually select an image for this button. So that's what I'm going to do. So the button on the far left is going to be my zoning button. So now that I know what that's going to be called, let's call it the zoning button. And what else I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add this style to the hovered and the pressed images as well. So if I drop down here and I do the zone again, and then if I'm hovering over this, I'm just going to have the same image, but I'm going to grey it a little bit. So I'm just going to click on this tint value here and make it a little bit grayer. So when our mouse hovers over it, the image does change colour ever so slightly, just for some good user feedback. And then similarly with the pressed one, this time I'm just going to colour it a bit blue, a bit of a light blue colour, just to show that we have actually pressed this image. So if I compile and save that, then that should be good. I'm just going to duplicate this twice. Zoning button 1, let's rename this to the road button. We just need to change the image to the road button for each of the individual styles. Save that, and then let's just position it properly. So let's just place this properly. So we were at 400 for the first button, so this can be placed at 500. And I believe it was 950 down, like that. And then let's just do the same for the last one. This is going to be, we're going to do a healthcare as our first building options. So we're going to make a healthcare button. Again, so that'll be at 600 and that'll be at 950. And I'll just go through and quickly replace all of the icons. So there we go. Now we have our 3 buttons like that. And the last thing I want to add is an image, and that image is going to be the highlight texture that I mentioned at the start. We're actually just going to start this off to the side, keep it at the same Y position for now. the image will be the highlight texture. We don't want to give this a tint or anything. And to start with, we actually want this to be invisible. So you can change this visibility to hidden, and then that won't be reflected when we start the game up. And then for priority order, I actually just want to move this up to the top like that, and that means it gets rendered last, so it'll be rendered behind the buttons. I do actually need to change the size. I forgot to do that, so just make that 96 by 96 again. Oh, 96, there we go. And then once that's actually behind these buttons, you'll see that it makes a nice highlight. Okay, so now we need to actually add this to our main HUD. And how to do that? Well, we actually need to create something called a HUD class. So if you just create a new Blueprint class and search for HUD, you'll see you can create a base class of HUD. We're going to call this our City Builder main HUD, like that. You do actually have to run some functionality in here to connect it to the widget you've made. So in the event graph, just drag off the begin play, and all you need to do is call create widget, like that. We want to choose the class that we just made, so that'll be our main HUD widget, like so. With the return value, we want to right click on that and promote it to a variable, and that means we've always got a reference to this in here. So we'll call this our main HUD widget ref. So we've always got that. And then lastly, we want to pull this out and say add to viewport. We can either drag that across or use our HUD ref. I'm just going to delete that so it looks a bit neater. And then to actually see this HUD, if we go back to our content and into our game modes, you'll remember that we use this game mode as our game mode base and it's overriding the current level game mode. If we go in here to the HUD class, we can now select our City Builder main HUD, compile, save that, go to the main game, and when I hit play now, you can see my 3 buttons appear. And when I hover over them, you see that they kind of tint grey for each individual one. If I click, you'll see a flash of blue. There's no functionality on there yet, but you can see that there is a HUD there. Okay, that's a good starting point. Okay, so now we need to go back into our main HUD widget. So just closing down those texture tabs to neaten things up. And in Unreal's HUD designer, you also have access to a graph. And this is going to be familiar to you because it's very blueprint heavy. And this actually allows you to run a bunch of logic in here, as well as add in variables and functions, so you can do all your UI work within this widget, which is super, super useful. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create a new function in here, and this is going to be called onCategoryButtonClicked. So the idea of the buttons I have in here is kind of like in City Skylines, I will click on the road button and eventually, not right now, but eventually, this will create another sub-menu that will have a bunch of different roads that I can click on, and then whatever I've clicked on there, I will click on and it will spawn in world. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this function that runs logic every time one of the actual category buttons, so the main buttons like zone, healthcare, roads has been clicked, so it actually can run some logic. It's going to actually take in a few parameters, in fact just the one. It's going to take in a button reference. So an object type button, just an object reference of that. We're going to call this in button pressed, like that. And we're going to actually have an output, which is going to be a Boolean. And this is going to be called highlight showing. So basically it's going to return whether the highlight image we have is going to be showing or not. That logic can be calculated in here, so that's what we're going to do. And actually to calculate that, I need to actually rename the image, so it's not just called image1, that's not very descriptive. So let's call that the highlight slot, just so we know what that is. And I'm going to pull a reference to this in here. And then I'm going to do similar logic for both of these. I just need to pull out and say slot as canvas slot. So a canvas slot is basically, if we look at our designer, one canvas slot is one of these individual objects. So the canvas panel is a canvas slot and that holds all this stuff. So I can move that around and scale it, and I can do the same with all these things. And to do that in Blueprint, you need to use it as a canvas slot. And then from this, I can get the position like that. And then the return value, I'm just going to break out the 2D vector. So I've got the X and the Y. I'm going to do this exact same logic with the button that gets passed in. So slot as canvas slot, get position, break out this vector as well. And the way I'm actually going to determine whether the button that's coming in, if that was also the previous button that was pressed, we're going to run some slightly different logic. So I'm just going to do an equals here. And I'm going to compare the X value of the highlight slot and the button pressed. If this is equal, then we know that the button that we're currently passing in was the previous button pressed, because we've moved the highlight slot to the same X value, which means this must be the one that is clicked. So it's going to do a branch there. So what we're going to do as well, just before we forget, I'm going to pull this out, and I'm just going to do a not boolean on there. Drag this over, and I'm going to plug this into the return node. Because of the way we're setting this up, if the highlight slot is already equal to the button press that's come in, then we know that that button was pressed previously. So this time we'll be turning off the highlight. So we'll be returning this as false. Otherwise, we'll return it as true because the highlight is now going to be shown. So this is where it's a little bit confusing. So if this is true, we want to make the highlight invisible. So we're going to set visibility, and we're just going to grab the highlight slot, plug that in, and that is going to now become hidden. And the other thing we actually want to do, if I just actually use this slot as a canvas slot, I want to set the position to be different. I want to set the position to be way off to the left. So I'm going to set this to 200 and the Y as just the same 950. And then that way, the next time we come in here, we are running normal logic on comparing the two X values. And then just as a final, let's plug that into there. And then if this condition is false, so the highlight slot currently isn't at the position of the button, then we need to move it to the position of the button. So again, as the canvas slot, we're going to pull this and we're going to do set position. And we actually just want to set this to the exact position of our button. So plug that string in there. And then the last thing we need to do is we just need to make sure that our highlight slot is currently visible, because we are doing different stuff to mess with its visibility. Plug that in there, the target visibility will be visible. Let's plug that in, compile, save that. And then if we go back to our event graph, what I can do is if I click on the button variables on the left here, at the bottom you can see the different events, and these are different events we can bind to. I'm actually just going to bind to the on-clicked ones. If I just click that plus button, it creates an event for me, which is really nice. I'll pull that out and I'll say on category button clicked. And then the in button pressed is our healthcare button, like that. Basically just doing the same for all of them here. So let's add in a road button and a zoning button one. I can probably move these a bit closer together. Just copy paste this, copy paste it, plug them in, and just make sure we drag the right buttons into the right slots. Okay, and right, let's see what we get in game. So now you can see when I click on buttons that they kind of got a nice little yellow highlight behind them. If I click on this button again, the highlight disappears. Click on this one, it appears, it just moves along, but if I click on one again, it cycles between. Cool, that's some good user feedback. I know the picture isn't completely clear here. I'm not an artist, so we do need to spruce this up again in the future, but we'll get there when we get there. Okay, so now we actually need to add some functionality because we have these button presses, but that doesn't change anything in game. So I want to actually do all my functionality from my player controller because that's where I run all this logic. So if you open up the City Builder player controller, you'll remember that this is where we've got our update placement and our spawn building and all that information. I want to create a new event in here, new custom event. I'm going to call this on placement info updated. I've put a capital L in there for some reason. And it's going to take in a couple of parameters. So we want to take in our base asset that we made, our placeable base asset class reference to one of those, because we're trying to override this placeable actor type. We'll call this in placeable actor type. And we also actually, just as an extra, this isn't functionality we will do right now, but it is building for the future. We want to say an in placeable mode. And this is going to be our building enum that we have lurking around. So this building type enum. And we actually want to make a new variable for this player controller class that is our placeable building type. Oh, just a bit of misspelling there. And this again wants to be of type building type. And the reason I'm putting this in here is just so that we have some kind of stuff built for the future when we want to do zoning. I've already got the button there. But I do plan on doing zoning in the future for like just zoning mass areas of industry, residential and commercial. So easy as that really. And then we just want to set our placeable actor type to the actor type that comes in. Our placeable building type, just the same thing. Let's just hook that up and set that to whatever comes in. Compile and save that. Right, we're going to want to run some slightly different logic here. And that's going to be based off whether our placeable building type is equal to none. So if we don't have a placeable building type, then we want to just kind of remove the building that we've currently got spawned that is kind of like highlighting what we're about to place. Like if you remember, if I press play, I have actually spawned a road tile here that is just a reference to show where the thing I'm actually placing is going to be. So if the thing coming in, if this is none, then we probably don't want to use that anymore. We probably want to get rid of it. So if that is true, then actually we want to just drag this branch up and we want to call our set placement mode enabled. And we just want to leave that as false. If we compile, save that in. And then if this is some kind of building type, then we actually want to refresh the building that we have. So if I go into set placement mode, you'll see all this logic here that creates the template building so you can see where it spawns. So I'm actually just going to highlight all of this. And then I'm going to right click and I'm going to actually say collapse to function. Like that. And what this does is it basically means I have a new function that has all of this logic in, because I want to call it from multiple places now, so it is slightly different. I don't want to call it new function 1. I'm going to call it refresh placeable building. Compile, save it. And then if I go back to my event graph where I'm in the new event we've created, I'm just going to pull this down. I'm going to call refresh placeable building. Like that. Actually, another thing I want to do is I want to check if we already have a placeable actor in world. So if I do an is valid on this, and just make sure that I run into that first. If this actor isn't valid at the moment, then let's just go straight to the refresh building. But if this actor is valid, then we probably want to destroy it. So let's just destroy that actor. And then we can go into our refresh there. because if this comes in and we're trying to just spawn a new building, then we might end up with just some random actors floating around, which could cause some issues. So let's just do that as a nice little cleanup. Okay, now we just need to call this function that we've made from our main HUD widget. So if we go back to our unclicked buttons, so in here we need to find a reference to our player controller. So what I can, if I just delete the construct and just use a pre-construct, I can do get player controller. Yes, we'll just get it from player index because it's a single player game. And then the return value, if we cast this to our player controller like that, plug it in, and we're actually just going to again promote this to a variable so we've always got a reference of it. Might just rename that to our player controller ref like that. Obviously we're only doing that if it succeeds. If it doesn't succeed, then there's something wrong with our game, so we want to be very careful with that. And then once these category buttons have been clicked, let's just do a branch on here. And we want to say, if this highlight is now showing on the healthcare button, then if we pull out our player controller reference, let's call the event that we made. So that was the placeable info updated. So if that's true, let's go into there. The placeable actor type, we don't actually have an actor for the healthcare button, so let's just quickly draw up one. So we'll go to content, game options, objects. We've got this building asset, but it's currently the wrong type because we updated to our base class the other episode. So let's just do a placeable base asset. Select that for now, and this will just be our city builder healthcare base, and then we'll update this in the future and whatever. But for now, let's just add a cube to it. So we've got a bit of visual representation. It can be 5 to 2 for scale, and then let's just move it up in the Z by 100 units. And let's just color it green. Let's compile that. Okay, go back to our main HUD widget, and then the placeable actor type, let's make it the healthcare base. And the placeable mode for this will be a placed building, like that. Road button, similar. Let's just do another branch of that. We're using this. We can use the same player controller reference. I'm just going to drag this a little bit down, space it out. So on placement info updated. If that goes into true, then let's use our road tile. Set the placement mode to road. And then finally, what we want to do is, if we've clicked the zoning button, do another branch. Then we just want to call this function again. But we actually want to set this to be none, and the placeable mode is going to be set to none for now, just because we don't have any zoning. Oh, I need to plug that into there. And then the other thing we want to do is we actually want to do this kind of logic as well. If the highlight showing ever comes back as false. So in all these branches, we're just going to always pull the false down. I'm not going to be able to make that very neat, unfortunately. So let's just pull the false down to here, here, and here. Maybe that would look neater if it was above. Or maybe just off and up to the side. Okay, that'll be fine. Okay, and I did just do a quick check off camera. There are a couple of very minor bugs in here. So what you want to do is go into our on category button clicked object. And what's actually happening is this, we don't need to do this not boolean. And the reason for that is we can actually just drag this boolean all the way in. What's happening here is this check gets run again when it's plugged into the return node. So by setting the position updates here, we're actually assuming that we're using the old logic for this, like I would in C++. That was an error of mine. So just make sure you get rid of that not value and you just plug this boolean straight in. And the other thing we want to do, if you go to the player controller, After we do this refresh placeable building, we just want to set our placement mode enabled again. So call that, and then just tick that. And then hopefully now, when we run the game, hit play, the road is still our default one. So if I click road, I'm now on road. If I click it again to get rid of the highlight, I'm now no longer placing anything down. If I click the healthcare, my little building shows up that I can plonk down. Click back on the road and I can place the road. Can't place it on there. And I can now actually start choosing what I want to place. Which is really cool. And I think that's probably a good ending point for this episode, actually. I'm going to carry on. Oh, I tell you what we need to do. Just quickly, in the healthcare, make sure this cube, the collision preset, is on our buildings preset. That's what was happening there. But yeah, this is a really good point to end on. The next episodes, we're going to start actually getting into the city building mechanics very soon. I might do zoning next episode. I'm not 100% yet. Or I might just start doing some like healthcare buildings and creating some logic for that. Let me know in the comments what you would like to see me work on next. What is the priority for you guys? I hope this video was very helpful and informative for you. And yeah, I hope you're enjoying the series. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.